Hello, and on the gaming table today we're taking a look at battle number 4 in the Strength and Honor campaign. So once again, this is the fictional Mithridatic War battles before Sulla joined in the area around Greece, and we've got some Pontic forces going up against some local late Republican Romans, the forces of Chares against Livius. Now, in the last battle, the Pontic forces gathered lots of experience, crossed the 5 experience point threshold, and have picked up a lot of characteristics and qualities. The Romans still getting there, most of the units on 4, and also last battle the Romans lost access to their cavalry. They'll make no more appearances in the campaign. So the battle today was set up on a fairly open plain, although there is a small patch of woods in the middle. That's going to be rather disruptive to both sides, but let's see how things play out. In terms of the command boards, the Romans didn't do so well on the auguries. The Pontic forces doing much better. They put more points into defense and movement. However, they do have a lower breakpoint, only 15. Pontic forces took the first turn and they moved generally forward, although their skirmishes on the right flank were a little bit delayed. And the Romans tried to move up and get their skirmishes into the woods here. However, they failed to make that move, and so that ended their turn. Play passed back to the Pontics. The forces of Pontus moved up more with the scythe chariots and cavalry on the left flank, moving up to a rather congested block of legions that you can see there. And then in the Roman turn, they moved their skirmishers into the woods and encountered the Pontic skirmishers in ambush there. That's a little bit disruptive to things. The Romans managed to get one of their other legions up, but the rest of their line not really moving very much at this point in time. The Pontic forces managed to move the cavalry further forward, and the Thureophoroi, they're getting ready to engage here with these legions. And the skirmishers here managed to drive back the opposing skirmishers and disorder them, giving them a setback card. So here the Roman right flank is looking a little bit congested and also looking like it might get outflanked here by the chariots. While on the left, things haven't moved very far and the two lines are still facing off against each other from some distance. The Romans in their turn decided they need to get forward, so the warbands moved forward rapidly, some of the other legions moving forward slowly. And then in the Pontic turn, the cavalry and the chariots moved forward once again. In the next turn, the Roman skirmishers charged into the Pontic skirmishers in the woods. However, they were beaten back badly and suffered disorder, so now both units of Roman skirmishers are disordered. The Pontic skirmishers, seeing both disordered, decided to chase them down. In the Pontic turn, they had a go at the disordered skirmishers, but they held their ground. And then they started to move their chariots around to the flank of the Roman legions. The general's cavalry also moved up, tried to charge here, but failed to make the distance. On the left side of the battlefield for the Romans, the warbands managed to charge in against the pikes. However, the pikes held firm. And then Livius, with his experienced legion, tried to get through the piece of wood here that was in front of them. Unfortunately, got a bit tangled up in doing so, and play passed back to the Pontics. The Pontic phalanxes fought out a grinding battle against the legions, neither side giving ground. And at this stage, things are not looking too good for the Romans. They're a little bit scattered on their left flank, the Pontic right here, and on the other flank, the Romans are still a bit congested, and both of their skirmishers are disordered. Things not looking so good. In the Pontic turn, it begins with the raw phalanx having a go at the raw legion, managing to disorder it and push it back, although they didn't give very much ground. And then the general's cavalry tried to charge in, but once again, didn't quite get the command through, and so things fell apart. Play passes to the Romans. For the Romans now, Livius managed to get his troops through the woods, and then the legions tried to move across so that their flank was not so exposed to the chariots. However, they failed to pull off that maneuver. Back to the Pontics now, and they managed to drive into the legions here that were already disordered, driving them back, although no more confusion. They managed to hold their discipline and don't leave the battlefield. But the Pontic phalanx follows up to keep the pressure on. Another phalanx had a go at the warbands here and managed to make them retire in disorder, both units suffering setbacks as a result of that. The raw phalanx then tried to follow up into the disordered units, however, it failed to make the charge, its reaction time not being so good. But here on the right, things looking pretty good for the Pontic forces with lots of disorganized units and a pretty broken up line. While on the left here, they're looking to outflank these legions. In the Roman turn, Livius is pulling his hair out with all of the chaos going on around the battlefield. He tries to recover the disorder of the legion on the left of the picture here. However, they fail and remain disordered. With play quickly passing back to the Pontics, the most veteran phalanx here drives into the disordered legion and pushes it back once again. The general's cavalry finally charges in and manages to push their foes back. The chariots also manage to turn, so now that they're in the exposed flank of the Roman legions. Over on the right flank, the raw phalanx manages to push into the warbands here and drives them back in further confusion. And in the Roman turn, with their first action, they manage to recover the disorder in the legion that's facing off against the phalanxes now. At least that will enable them to hold the line a little bit more. The Levi legion then charges into the skirmishes, and unfortunately there's a lot of confusion and a grinding result as both sides are driven back. Unfortunately for the Pontics, their skirmishes rout from the field, but the Romans are picking up setbacks here as well. With play passing back to the Pontics, they manage to drive another one back, and then the general smashes into the legions in front of him and pushes them back once again. The Pontic skirmishers finally manage to push back one of the Roman skirmishers, and the raw phalanx tries to charge into the disorganized warband again, however it fails to make the distance. Play passes over to the Romans. The Romans on the right flank manage to get their Levi legion moved over into the gap created by the fleeing skirmishers, at least solidifying their line a little. But with not much else going on for the Romans here, this is how things look. Not good if you're a Roman. The skirmishers fight another battle in front of the woods with the Romans running away and the Pontic skirmishers being very keen, facing off against the Levi legion now. And at this stage, with lots of setbacks piling up on the Romans, it seemed pretty obvious to Chares that he was going to win the day. So what he decided to do is call Homunculus Est to try and fatigue the Roman army, and then he was going to stick the boot in and try and rout as many of the Roman units as he possibly could. The first part of the plan works, with the Romans here having a grand total of 12 points towards their break of 17, so they are fatigued, and now it makes it harder for them to maneuver. The rest of the battle proceeded as you might expect, so let's take a look at what happened in each of the three places of most interest. So beginning on the Pontic right, there was a lot of pushing between the phalanxes and the legions, with the legions usually coming off second best, getting driven back. The raw legion charging into the warbands, causing them to run away further. The legion came back at the raw phalanx, managed to push it back some, and the skirmishers tried to rally, but unfortunately they routed from the field. The legion kept pushing on the raw phalanx, driving it back, until it ran into the more veteran phalanx in front of it, which managed to hold up two legions and start driving back the levies. The warbands tried to recover from their disorder. Some of them did, and the others fled the field. And then the most veteran phalanx managed to drive back the strongest of the legions in this area and rout it completely from the field. The raw phalanx chasing after the warbands, and the veteran phalanx taking on the Levi legion, and the result is as you would expect, lots of disorder, lots of running away. Over on the right here, the Levi legion managed to take on the skirmishers here, drive them back and rout them from the field, and followed up enthusiastically towards the woods. The skirmishers at the back tried to reform. Some of them managed to do so, but the cavalry crunching into the legions here was never going to be a good thing. The general managed to disorder the legion in front of him, and then the fellow cavalry managed to charge into the legion here and push it right back towards the edge of the battlefield. The chariots turned and managed to charge into the flank of the disordered legion, pushing them back and consequently routing them from the field. The cavalry kept pushing on the legions, driving them back, and they fled as well, the cavalry chasing off after them. The Levi legion, kind of isolated in the middle of the field here, sought some refuge in the woods, but then got pinned by the chariots who got into their flank. As the cavalry returned to the field and the general kept pushing on the skirmishers, he managed to push them off the table and chased after them as well. The Thuringophoroi got through the woods, ran into the Levi legion and managed to drive it back. And then the chariots made a bold move into the flank of that legion. Unfortunately, their charge was not quite so effective. They managed to disrupt themselves as well as the legion. The chariots fled the field, and the Romans were very, very disordered. That meant the Thurii had no trouble in pushing them back and back, and then the returning general's cavalry caught them in a sandwich, and that legion routed. Not much was happening in the centre of the table. There was really only Livius and his experienced legion left. He tried to take on 2 phalanxes and targeted the weaker of the 2. He was a bit worried about his exposed flank, and so he needed to push through here quickly and maybe make a move on the Pontic camp. His first attack was not so good. He bounced off the phalanx, had to go in again obliquely, but this time managed to push them back a little. The phalanx next door managed to turn, so now Livius's flank is exposed, but he manages to push that phalanx back, giving himself some breathing room. Unfortunately, great maneuvering by the Pontic phalanx put them into Livius's flank. That disordered him, and then the phalanx he'd been chasing charged into the front and smashed him backwards as well. Things kept going in that fashion, with Livius's legion running away disordered into the woods. And as night fell on the battlefield, things were called to a close. Chares calling homunculus est, which Livius decided not to defend. There was very little point. Livius had a mountain of cards here, most of the deck in fact, and ended up with a score of 62, a rather ridiculous amount against a break of 17. Again, Chares wasn't looking for the win, he was looking for total destruction. Chares, on the other hand, didn't have very many points at all, only 10, so he was pretty safe. So, a rather convincing win for the forces from Pontus. Now, in the post-battle analysis, the Pontic forces lost their scythe chariots and a couple of units picked up a little more experience. However, on the Roman side, miraculously, almost all of the units managed to recover for the next battle. Just 1 raw legion is missing the next battle, everything else managed to return. Several units did pick up negatives though, so we've got a Levy Legion that's down combat rating, we've got the Warbands which are now +2 on discipline at the bottom, so some things like that, although they are picking up experience and they have picked up some qualities like drilled and stubborn along the way. So not a great day to be Romans, another victory for the Pontic forces. Let's see what happens in battle number 5. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again real soon.